Monuments, monuments, monuments,
Monuments. That's what the film needed.
That is what the film needed.
Just a good old monuments along.
Want to get into the war?
Monuments, man.
I'm to put a team together and do our best to protect buildings, bridges, and art before the Nazis destroy everything.
How many men? 6. Jesus.
Well, with you at 7.
That's much better.
So you want to go into a war zone with some architects and artists and tell our boys what they can and cannot blow up.
That's right.
Aren't we a little old for that?
Yes. We go through basic, and then we wait for orders.
Basic?
A little help.
Basic training. Oh, boy.
If you destroy an entire generation of people's culture, it's as if they never existed.
We got company. Frank, we gotta go!
That's what Hitler wants. And it's the one thing we can't allow.
So we get to shoot some Nazis?
It's your responsibility now.
I've never shot at anyone before.
He really wanted it all.
We better get it back.
What have you got? I seem to have stepped on a landmine.
Why'd you do something like that?
What do you got?
Lieutenant here seems to have found himself on top of an unexploded mine.
Why would you do that?
You all been spending too much time together.
Welcome, everybody, to the Film Board. This is very special, our very special monthly edition of the Film Board, the next reel, the Film Board. Got to get it right. I am Pete Wright. We've got Andy Nelson is over there.
Hello.
And Tom Metz is over there.
Hello, friends.
And that's it tonight.
Oh.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's it. It's just the three of us. Schedules and Arctic vortex got in the way of us this month. But we are still talking about the film that was scheduled, even though it's a little bit late, and that is The Monuments Men, George Clooney and his merry band of art rescuers.
That should have been the subtitle for the movie, like : George Clooney and his merry band of art rescuers. Sorry.
You guys are really... Now, I know you've seen it now. Oh, you saw it more than a week ago, and I just saw it today. And so maybe you've had time for your experience with it to ripen and perhaps go brown. Yeah, with age.
Fester like an open wound.
But I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about why. Convince me why. Because, we're missing the goodly Steve Sarmento, but he also is on the record as having liked this film.
Yeah.
And resented the mockery that has ensued in our back channel communication. And I find myself with him. I enjoyed this film, directed by George Clooney, produced by George Clooney and Grant Heslov, based on the book The Monuments Men by Robert Edsel. Why did this film not work for you?
This was a film that, I really wanted to see. I loved the trailer. I loved the premise. I loved the fact that it was based on a true story of some people who really did create this organization, Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program back in World War II to actually go save cultural important artifacts. And I really wanted to see the movie. I was a little nervous when I learned that the release date was being pushed back from, it was supposed to be a December release, and it got pushed back to February.
Oscar season to the graveyard.
Right, exactly. I heard that the reason that it was moved was not, in fact, that it was getting bad reviews or anything, but that George Clooney actually asked the studio for more time for post-production due to the special effects not being ready, and also because they were still trying to find the balance between the comedy and the serious tones. and he knew that it was going to push it out of award season, but he and the studio reluctantly moved it to February. Having heard that, the effects were great. I didn't notice any problems with any effects, so they really cleaned up those special effects nicely. As far as the balance between comedy and drama, they did not find the right balance between comedy and drama for me. It was really just a mismatched tones all the way through the film. As far as, am I supposed to be feeling this is a Achilles Heroes sort of mid-war art heist sort of film? Is it supposed to be a serious drama and the importance of art sort of film and the struggles that people were going through in these times? And that was the biggest thing, is I never felt that they found the right tone for the film. Plus, aside from that element of it, it also was really flat. It never had any great big, peaks, crescendoing at all. It just felt like it plodded along, and we had George Clooney's voiceover narration coming in, kind of telling us what was going on and explaining situations, and even the big build up to the end when they're trying to do that one last rescue. It came across very, they were trying to build tension into it by intercutting between the
Russians?
The troops. Yeah, the troops. The guys trying to pull all the art out of this mine where they found it, and with the Russians coming in to, now that the Nazis had all fled, they were coming in to kind of reclaim their property, basically, or their territories, and yeah, so it was just. But they tried building this tension, and it ended up just falling very flat, the way they built that tension, trying to make something happen, and then all of a sudden it cuts to, and I don't think you mentioned spoiler territory at the beginning of the show, Pete, but we're spoiling this movie wholeheartedly, and I'm about to spoil it here, but
we won World War II.
World War II. And not only did we save the art, but we left a nice American flag hanging over it. So clearly there wasn't that much of a race against time for these guys, because they had time to hang back these guys and drive away, and all the tension really kind of, the steam was let out of it for me. And then as the Russians are coming up, before they even get there, George Clooney's narration kicks in again, explaining the scenario and how they managed to save all this art. And it's just like, well, okay, where did the tension just disappear to? Clearly, they weren't that concerned about it. That was really it for me. The tonal imbalance all across the film, and paired with really plodding story.
I agree 100% with Andy. Another thing to add on to his points is I felt that the screenplay and the film was nervous about its own script and story that it was delivering. That it continually, while we're having these wildly fluctuating tone issues, all this kind of stuff, we are treated to speech after speech after speech, reminding us why this is important, why this is crucial, why this is as important as the people, the soldiers dying in war, as if it doesn't believe itself. A movie shouldn't have to keep sort of justifying its own story throughout, and I felt it really did, and that just sort of led to my not being able to get involved with it. I think it's such an interesting, fascinating story, and we were given a lot of anecdotal scenes, a lot of which didn't go anywhere, some weird sort of humor that didn't really hit that much, and also a huge list of A-list actors who none of them are given a character, a real fleshed out character. They're known by a couple little traits, and that's it. And so there's just really nothing to. And so and I won't spoil what yet, but when some of those characters do die, I was left feeling nothing, because I never got to know them as characters. They were just sort of the sum of their little quirks.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm being so harsh on it, because it's an affable film, is because of its pedigree. I love and respect everyone that was involved in it. And for something like this to just be so flat and such a misfire, I feel like coming down harder on it. And maybe that's not fair.
It's funny. I find myself in a position of agreeing with you on both of you on many points, but maybe just not to the degree of finding the film not that strong. I think the biggest problem for me with the film was my expectation, and this gets to Tom's point about the pedigree of the film. When I see a George Clooney, Matt Damon film, my expectation is now Oceans. Right, and I know there's some division on the greatness of Oceans, but I happen to be a fan of those films, and I love what they do for the big group kind of heist films. I like the ensemble cast films that comes out of these people, and so my expectation coming into the Monuments Men was that we were going to have these people. This group of people who all are able to pull off this air of being genuinely smarter than me in their wit and repartee, and I like watching them engage with one another, and that they are, by doing so, they end up being, funny and smart and not disrespectful to the job that they're doing, right? That's my expectation. I wanted to see that kind of treatment of this. This particular material, and it wasn't that film. That was not the film that I got, and it took me a little while, I think, to get into the sort of the vibe of what they ended up creating. I'm with you, Andy. I don't think it was as funny as maybe they had thought it was going to be. I don't know why, but maybe it's the subject matter. Maybe in general, Hitler's not that funny.
Unless it's springtime.
Right. But what I do like about this film is I think it's important as a reminder of what happened to art and culture in this period in history, and maybe I'm giving the film more credit than it deserves because of the ambition to take on what otherwise could be a fairly dry topic, but doing so in the interest of cultural importance, so that we don't forget. I think it is important. I found myself walking out deeply saddened by the underuse of some key members of the ensemble. I was very frustrated that Matt Damon was sort of off in his place with Cate Blanchett for so long in the film, even though I didn't, I went in. I can't remember who it was who had complained that the pieces with Matt Damon and Cate Blanchett were just so long, and I didn't find them long. I just found him missing from the meat of the story for much longer than I had wished. I think his rapport with these other actors is so strong that I missed him in those sequences. Yeah, and it ended up being sort of a film about multiple little buddy stories, as you have Bill Murray and Bob Balaban, off doing their thing, and John Goodman and Jean Dujardin doing their thing, and so it just ended up being a little bit sideways for me.
So I wonder, I don't know how much it has to do with anything as far as Matt Damon and his place in the film, but from what I've read, Daniel Craig was actually originally cast in that role and then had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts, and then Matt Damon came in and replaced him. And I'm guessing it was one of those George Clooney buddy calls saying, hey, I just had Daniel Craig drop. Do you think you could come on board and just do his part for him? So I don't know if that's why Matt Damon seemed oddly out of place with George Clooney in particular, because of that film relationship they have in the Ocean's films and everything.
Right.
But because I think Daniel Craig, I can see him being apart from George Clooney more, but I think you're right. I think you're definitely more of a fan of the Ocean's films than I am, but I still, when Matt Damon and George Clooney are in a film together, I still kind of expect them to be together because of that repartee that they have.
Right.
That's interesting to rethink about those scenes with Cate Blanchett with Daniel Craig, because
totally
they are
different.
so serious.
Yeah.
And not a part of that with Matt Damon. And again, like you just said about with Matt Damon and George Clooney movie, you expect the banter. That's really interesting, huh?
Yeah, that does make me rethink the film just in general a little bit, right? I mean, if you kind of imagine what Daniel Craig, just his presence in general, what that would lend to the ensemble. But in general, I liked it. I thought Cate Blanchett was. I thought she was very strong. I liked her overall arc. I loved the way she played building trust over the course of this film. I felt like by the time they had dinner together, that her handing over this incredibly valuable journal, a precious journal to her, was handing that over to Matt Damon was a real point to me. That was a bit of importance and weight, and I love what she brings to that.
Yes.
When she that whole sequence of dinner, when the French invite you to a formal dinner, you come formal. I never joke. That she just was wonderful. She was delightful to watch in that sequence, and overall, in spite of the whole Daniel Craig thing, I did think that the Matt Damon and Cate Blanchett stuff was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it brought more of the sentimentality to the film, and interspersed with the war stuff. I think part of the problem that I had with it, and I'm interested in your reflection on this, because of the timing of this story in relationship to the war, it always felt like these guys were struggling to find action of significance.
Yeah.
Therefore, it was not a buddy comedy. It was not an ensemble comedy. And it also wasn't really a war movie.
Right.
And it really wasn't a heist film. I mean, any parts of the heist part goes to the background.
That's right.
Right.
Like, we missed the heist. It feels like we're always showing up a little bit too late.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the tone that they were trying to create, and maybe that's why they're trying to inject it with some of that humor that seems to come from those those 60s films with the marching and the whistle, like the music with the whistling. Like, as soon as I heard that, it clicked me into the Kelly's Heroes and just that whole vibe of those sorts of films from back then. And it just, I was struggling with that. And you're right, I really enjoyed the tone of the scenes with Matt Damon and Cate Blanchett. I think they did such a great job in those scenes, despite the fact that I found those a little more boring. And maybe that's just because it was really it was such a tonal shift to jump to those moments that made them feel so much longer and more tedious. But I did really like that tone of the film. And if the whole film had that more dramatic, serious tone across it, I feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more.
Yes,
I don't know.
I completely agree.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's a casting issue. I mean, the fact that they're casting John Goodman and they're casting Bill Murray and John Dujardin to a certain extent. I mean, The Artist, certainly it was a very light and fluffy film, and he's a very congenial guy. And, Bob Balaban kind of he definitely has some serious stuff, but even he was in The Lady in the Water. And so, he goes into some territory of some not so great films. And
so is that what this is, Andy? I think about that too, right? The whole, because all of these actors are, they're phenomenally talented actors, right? And all of them have taken turns in wonderfully serious films, right? They all can do it. Mm-hmm. But are we so conditioned that when we see them together in an ensemble film like this that we just can't shake it? Our expectation for comedy?
I don't think so, because the tone shifts I didn't feel came from me feeling like, why isn't this more funny? Comes from huge, like a really long, for me, very long scene with Bob Balaban and Bill Murray dealing with a soldier out in the woods. A moment that has nothing to do with anything and comes to nothing except for just sort of some forced levity. I don't think that it's a fact of me coming in looking for comedy and not finding it. I felt that the way that the picture is written and directed, there's whole scenes of just kind of affable, I'm sorry to keep using that word, but affable nonsense, like with Bill Murray and Bob Balaban with The Soldier in the Woods, and the score definitely becoming sort of very bouncy and fun during that point. I felt that the film was trying to force me to feel different things, at times light, at times dark, and I never was with it. I was never along with the ride. Not because I didn't want to be, but because it was just too sudden, too weird, at times too schmaltzy. And then, there were times when I felt that they intercut sort of, there would be a levity nonsense scene, and then we'd go right into where soldiers are dying.
Well, and just a couple points that strike me. I mean, you brought up the Bob Balaban and Bill Murray with The Soldier in the Woods, it did seem so strange. But then there was the moment where they discover the art with the German, I can't remember the guy's name, but the one of the head Germans, the Stahl, they find him at his house and discover that he's got lots of stolen art in his place. So they track that down, and I really enjoyed that scene. I thought that was
great.
It was a great scene, but didn't you feel like it was the wrong set of buddies that discovered them?
Yes.
Well, in every case, the buddies were always doing things that I wasn't expecting. And also, like with Bill Murray and Bob Balaban, I mean, then, out of nowhere, Bob Balaban decides to play this record that Bill Murray got sent from his family, which, tonally was so strange to me. I know Steve said he was really touched by that scene, but all I could think of is like, here he is taking this record that his family made for him and playing it on the speaker for everybody to hear. I was like, what if it was like some private, intimate message? I don't know. It seemed really awkward that he would play it over the speakers for the entire company to hear. And, it was nice seeing Bill Murray kind of have that little, tender scene by himself. But at the same time, it's like, God, that seemed really awkward. And then, of course, it's a Christmas song and they sing so well. And I don't know.
One of the big reasons that a point that I made before, I couldn't care is because I didn't care about Bill Murray. I didn't care about Bob Balaban. I feel like you can cast people that can have like automatic likability, like John Goodman, Bob Balaban, Bill Murray in different order, but you can't just then rely on that. And I felt that it was relying on that. That's
one of the things I wanted to talk about, because at its core, even though this is based on a true story of a real unit, at its core, this is a superhero team movie, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at. It's in terms of structure, it might as well have been the Avengers. And that's when he builds the team in the beginning. When he goes around and he gives all these letters to all these guys, that's our chance to get to know, in just brief snippets, why these guys are important to the team. And for me, that is a sequence where this film falls woefully short in terms of allowing us to build an empathy for each individual member. It happened so fast with no sense of context for why these guys are important, why they're there, what is their function, what is their role, what is a little bit of their backstory. We see them painting on something and scraping at something and building a building, but we don't hear them. We don't hear why they're members of the team. We just have them there relying on their familiar faces that we're going to get through it. And then that backstory in so many ways is kind of peppered throughout the film, right? We hear, Bob Balaban says, well, these guys are architects. Well, okay. I mean, I saw one of them building a building, didn't know that about the other guy. So I felt like that sequence, that absolutely critical building the team sequence, failed. And I think that's part of why the team doesn't come together for me as an ensemble.
100% agree.
Yeah, so do I.
The other thing that I found tough, and I know I feel like I'm being a little bit hard on the film, even though I'm the one who liked it. But I
keep going. This is great.
Yeah, he's beginning to believe.
This unit, the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program, attached to the Allied Service. This was a group of 400 service members, right? I mean, between 1943 and 46, 400 people,
right,
were dedicated to this program, and at 400 people, in this program. If you look at, if you average out the total number of pieces recovered, 5 million, that's 12,500 pieces of art, sculpture, and culture recovered per service member in this unit over 3 years. In our film, each of these 7 members, 2 of them dead, but given the grace of we're going to suspend disbelief here, each one of these gents would be responsible for finding 714,285 pieces of art. I felt like the scale and scope of the movement was artificially shrunk for us to make it a harder slog, so to speak. And I found the film lacking for the lack of believable infrastructure behind it.
Yeah.
And this may be me being as hard on this film as I was on The Abyss last week. I'm okay with that, but I don't want to overthink it too much. But this was a real thing. And these, all 400 of these people did, great stuff. So.
Well, and how, let's see, did this film start right at the beginning of the program? And did it take us all the way through? I'm trying to remember the time, like if there was ever a sense as to when we were supposed to be fitting.
They never gave us a title card.
They never gave us a title card, but we started with
the formation of the team.
We started with it was Goering or Goebbels. I'm sorry. In Kate Blanchett's office picking out art for himself, and then we saw George Clooney giving the speech to the president.
That's right. Yeah, that was Hermann Goering.
It really was the beginning of it.
But then it takes us all the way through the end.
Yeah, through the end of
1945, when
the surrender, the fall of the Eagle's Nest. Yeah.
So there's never a sense that this group is growing.
That's it. That's my point.
You never get a sense. It always feels like whatever it is, it's just these 7 guys against the Nazis.
Right, these 7 guys against the Nazis with no appreciable passage of time apart from major milestones, like beginning of the formation of the thing and the end of the war.
Right.
There are pieces about it that I really like, though. In that third act, when they finally discover the twist about the mines, I particularly liked that, and I felt like the film finally built some intensity there that allowed me to coast more. And I was interested in how they uncovered the mines and how they got into the mines and how they found the art. I just felt in general, to echo something both of you have said, I didn't feel quite enough resonance that I wanted to feel on discovering this art that they wanted to feel. And particularly at the end, when they all come down to push the cart with the Madonna statue, it just didn't have the resonance that I felt like it should have, given this is what the film sort of hung its hat on, so to speak, that it's this Madonna that we want back. This is the one thing, in spite of the 15,000 other pieces in this particular mine. We want this one, and we're going to stake our own physical safety on finding this one by staying too late. And then we find it, and I felt like, oh, awesome. Woo.
Well, and part of that is because, it doesn't sell it to me that they're saving that art because that's a critical piece of art that needs to be saved. The only reason they're really putting any priority onto that particular Madonna is because Lieutenant Jeffries, played by Hugh Bonneville, he dies trying to defend that piece.
Yeah.
And so they do it kind of in his honor to make it so that he didn't die for nothing, which, is valiant. But at the same time, it's just like, but I don't know. It didn't give it any resonance, like you're saying. It kind of diminishes all of that.
And even though I liked it, at the end of the film, when Clooney is making his final assessment to the president, he asks,
many speeches.
Oh my gosh. He asks for permission to continue, and the president says, really, seriously? You think in 30 years, what would he have said? What would this, this guy who's dead, what would he have said? Do you think he would have said that it was worth it? And I don't know if it was delivery or what, but he might as well have been at a backyard picnic choking down a hot dog as he says to the president, yeah, I think he would have. Like that's the freaking point of the film and the service of these 400 people, if in service of this as a true story. I think that the cultural weight of what these guys did in an extremely trying time is more substantive than that closing line gave us. And I think a lot of the weight of the film hangs on the delivery of that bit.
And if I can bring up a point that I brought up in the beginning, when I said that the film doesn't seem to, at times, believe in itself.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're right in that.
It's constantly, I mean, because what they did is amazing, and what an amazing thing to do during a time of war. But the screenplay is constantly trying to convince us of that.
Yeah.
Do you think some of that came from, because I read some critique somewhere saying, oh, Hollywood's patting itself on the back again. Of course, it's, people having to save the art, and Hollywood's going to make, a movie about people saving art because they're all artists. And it's said in a very kind of I thought it was a terrible opinion. I didn't agree with it. But I'm wondering if that was something that Clooney was conscious of when making the film and felt he had to go out of his way to try to dance around this, which ended up making it feel very unsure.
Right. I think that's exactly, one of the big things, I applaud George Clooney and Grant Heslov. They're probably some of the only people in Hollywood that could get this film made.
Yeah.
And I think that the amount of hoops that they jumped through in order to get it made, casting such a huge amount of A-list actors, having these scenes of forced levity, while also trying to remind you that war is terrible and the soldiers are amazing, but again, soldiers are dying. But again, Picasso, I wonder if maybe it's just something that works as a book and not as a movie. It's just too
or as,
hard.
Real life.
It's something, right? But you know what I mean, as far as like being able to really emotionally and convincingly tell such a story. A book has so much more breadth and time and weight and all that kind of stuff, and doesn't have to try to boil it down into buddy moments, doesn't have to boil it down into false ticking clocks, all that kind of stuff.
Can you guys,
or even a documentary? I would love to sit and watch a documentary about this and get a lot more meat about the real people who were doing this.
But that's I go back to, for example, Band of Brothers, which is a miniseries that I could watch. I could watch it anytime, any day. You put on a couple of sequences of Band of Brothers, and that's the quality that I have come to expect from my war movies, right? That are discussing this incredibly powerful historical moment. And I did not get the quality of Band of Brothers in The Monuments Men, and that's what I expected from the treatment of this material. How do you guys compare this in terms of the script, right? Clooney, leading the charge on the screenplay, comparing this to, for example, Ides of March or Good Night and Good Luck.
I would put this at the bottom.
I would put it above Leatherheads, but still.
I left that one out. I haven't seen it, so
and I didn't mean to be sort of snarky about this misfires of this movie, but again, maybe the only way he could get it made was this attempt at a Kelly's Heroes, or was, as I was saying before, like Great Escape kind of feeling of like it wants everything to be so light and fun and interesting, but then it also takes on World War II.
Right.
And it never chooses between the two as if it's trying to justify itself. I think that was one of because the reason I brought up Leatherheads is because Leatherheads, which I think was one of his biggest other misfires, because he was trying to make sort of a madcap, what are words for that? Like an old-timey kind of comedy.
Yeah, it was meant to be that rapid dialogue sort of feel to it, right? Yeah.
And I thought it completely missed the mark, and I feel this one did too, of just the way of trying to ape that kind of a. If you're going to try to ape that kind of a thing, then do it.
Yeah.
And don't look back. And this film was constantly looking over its own shoulder.
Right.
I didn't care for what I just said, I believe in it. I don't like how I just said it, but you know what I mean. But it was just so nervous in tone the entire time.
Well, and that's why I go back to I think for me the most apt comparison in terms of screenplay is Good Night and Good Luck, because it's a period film that addresses important issues in an important industry, right? We go from the military-industrial complex circa the war to huge period of media transformation, and to me, Good Night and Good Luck was another I would say cautiously paced film. But I felt like the script lived up to the performances that delivered it.
Absolutely.
And in this film, I found it fell short. And so I guess I'm trying to find a pattern if there's a pattern to be found in terms of where did this fall short? Is it strictly the screenplay? Is it casting? Is it I don't know that I can. My overall experience was a positive one, but I really see the shortcomings in the film.
It does feel it feels like just it has to be screenplay, because I mean it all boils down to how it's written, and then the tone comes from that. I mean, if you write one scene where it has more levity to it, and then you have these intensely much more dramatic scenes between Matt Damon's character and Cate Blanchett's character, and you're bouncing back and forth, it's going to create a strange tonal shift. And I mean, that's what I would say are its faults. I mean, if you look at all the other films that he's directed, I haven't seen Leatherheads, but Ides of March, Leatherheads, Good Night and Good Luck, even Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, they all remain much truer to the tone that he sets out in the beginning, whether it's a more wacky tone or more serious tone. And I think that they all work much better because of that. I just don't feel that the script, and then I would also have to say the direction, it comes down to that, and creating a misfire as far as the tone goes all across the board with this one.
I have a guess.
Do share.
And this is based on nothing at all.
Oh, good. That's good.
You like
those?
Yeah, set us up.
Yeah, when they said, I think it's laughable when they said that they needed more time to perfect the special effects. I don't remember any special effects. There's no Smaug.
That's because they're so good.
They're invisible.
Jean Dujardin wasn't even in this movie.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, unless John Goodman was just like avatared in like CGI, there's no special effects.
He did look unreal tall in this film.
Redo. I think that he tried to make a film and it didn't work, and the stuff that did work was a little bit of the levity, and so they started sandwiching in all of this stuff with like Bob Balaban and Bill Murray in post.
Maybe
There were actually like reshoots. That the reason that the film feels so disjointed at times is because they filmed a bunch more different scenes, whether it be the dramatic, I assume more the comedic later, and that's why it feels like all of these things are so sandwiched in together and hammered one after another and feel so disjointed, is because they were never supposed to be together in the first place. That's my fun guess.
Well, it's a good theory. I mean, I think that it could certainly make sense as to why it feels the way it does.
Because he's just too good of a director. I mean, all of his films are so consistent in tone and manage pathos, but also humor so well. And this one is just a bunch of scenes put together at times.
Talk to me about the cinematography. Cinematographer Faden Papa, he's Greek.
Michael.
I don't know. He's Greek, and it's all in Cyrillic. I can't even.
Yeah, it's Feeding Papa Michael, right?
So he did. Let's see. He did Descendants, Ides of March. Also did Nebraska, which we talked about enjoying. What's your sense of how the cinematography approached this particular period? Do you think it did it justice?
I mean, I didn't. There was nothing about it that struck me as strangely out of place. I mean, it all looked fine. It didn't. He wasn't trying to create anything new or different. I didn't think. I thought it all looked. I mean, it all worked for me. I don't know. I didn't have any problems with it. It didn't stand out though.
I agree. The things that stand out for me for the visuals was the editing. And I think it was probably because they were trying to go for, like you said before, a Kelly's Heroes thing with such an old-fashioned-y type of editing and filming sometimes. With like, this is the most cross dissolves I've seen in a film in like a decade. And I know that was probably on purpose as a throwback. That isn't something that gets me excited. But still, no, I had no problem with the cinematography.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm with you guys. I mean, I felt like what I miss with the cinematography in general is the movement of the camera that takes advantage of the opportunity of the material, and I didn't find it took advantage of the opportunity of the material in terms of scope. I mean, when he says at the end, we took in 5 million pieces of art and culture. And what we saw, I mean, there were a couple of sequences. I thought one of the powerful reveals was the discovery of the gold bullion. As the lights come on and we get to see, Leonidas and, big man from Roseanne. Oh, what's his name? I already
John Goodman.
John Goodman. We get to see them kind of staring in awe at the acres of gold on the floor of this particular storage room. I thought that was a really nice reveal. And I want more of the scope and scale of the material that we're looking at. And I just felt like it was a little bit flat and constrained. And there was, like Andy said, there was nothing new that embraced and extended our look at the war. And there have been such fantastic films about the war, and this one just, it didn't do anything. It didn't attempt an approach that was particularly novel.
Yeah, really I completely agree. And there's this one part. I don't know if I have any of the nouns or verbs needed to.
I can't wait.
It's when they're on Monuments Men's Radio, or whatever, when they're all talking to each other. And they're like...
From like down the hall?
Not in that scene, but later when I guess maybe it's not on Monuments Radio, but they have their walkie-talkies, but they're talking to each other from across the country, it seems like. Okay. And they go, how's it going? And you get a shot of George Clooney with a helmet on saying... It's getting really, he says something like, it's getting really, really messy here. And you see sort of a Jeep go by. And that was it. And I was like, I don't believe this.
Like, I know, that looks about as bad as the pumpkin field where I got my pumpkins at Halloween this year.
I was just kind of like, I don't believe in the war that you're telling me about. And I know for a fact that it happened because there's been books about it. But I was just, the only reason I bring that up is because the idea of scope of like, it's sort of a medium shot with Jeeps going by in the background. And you see sort of some rubble, but nothing else. And you kind of like how when we said some of us said with Jake Ryan Shadow Monster that like this would have been really good if the Bourne movies hadn't been made and if James Bond hadn't been rebooted.
Yes.
We need better things. If you're gonna keep telling us that this is an important war movie, we need to see some war.
Take, for example, and this was one that I wrote down, the landing of the Monuments Men on the beaches at Normandy.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to belittle their landing there because they all stood around and looked like it was really important. Mm-hmm. But to me, it looked very much like they just finished shooting Saving Private Ryan, and then the next day they came back and shot this.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I did not share the sense of awe and because it was just like not enough. And perhaps this falls on Clooney. Perhaps it falls on just overall production design. But there were so many sequences where it was just not enough, and that one really stood out to me.
Well, and that's one of those ones where it's like I understand that maybe there's some importance in the context of their story, kind of as the afterthought army, kind of coming in to try to rescue these things, but they're not obviously front line type of people, so we don't get that Saving Private Ryan story. But in that sense, at the same time, I also felt like the power of them landing on the beach really was diminished period. And did they even need that scene to be there? It really didn't carry any weight as far as me understanding the context of who these guys are and what their mission is. It came down to seeing them on the beach looking around like you said, it looked like they were looking at an old movie set that was getting ready to get taken down. And then they go off to do something, trying to save the art. I didn't need it to be there.
Yeah, I mean, you think about other films that have done the war is just behind us sequences, right? I mean, we're stepping on a big battle that just happened, and I'm thinking of films like God, even Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket, I mean, even for crying out loud, Luke discovers Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru had more weight than these guys landing on Normandy.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't there. I'm glad Tom laughed at that, because that was like my only laugh line in the entire show.
Because of the set design, because of the awe that I wasn't feeling, it hurt their cause for me.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, oh yeah, you guys aren't soldiers. What you're doing, and I don't want to go out on a limb, but just sort of saying, like, because the movie was so unsure of itself, I know I've said that over and over again, it was scenes like that it was like, oh yeah, this isn't as important.
Yeah.
As people storming the beach in Normandy. I guess, I don't know. I go back and forth on that, but that was that just seemed like one of those things, like how you said there were no title cards of where we are, of just, remember the war? Here's where we are now.
Right.
In a way that I thought actually hurt the film and hurt the cause for these.
And then we did get a title card in 1977.
Right, when it comes to years later, when he brings his son to the statue.
Which seemed like a weird placement for a title card. Because normally when you expect a title card, to bring us up to current, but he's just bringing us up to, 3 decades ago.
Right.
So I don't know. What else stands out that you want to talk about?
Well, just as one quick thing, not that it's hugely important, but George Clooney's father played the old George Clooney character in that scene in 1977.
That wasn't George Clooney in makeup?
It was his dad.
That's adorable.
You know what? It's funny that you thought it was George Clooney in makeup. I actually thought they somehow... Where's the original guy? Stokes.
Oh, that would make sense.
I assumed it was him. Apparently not.
Nope.
Probably no one that was involved in the Monuments Men looked like George Clooney.
Oh, it's because it was loosely based on George Stout, who died in 1978. Which is why they probably brought it up only to 1977.
Probably.
Just under the wire.
Because 1979, the scene would have been much more dour. Wah, wah.
Oh, man.
What are you, me?
That is
Making the jokes that almost get cut out of the podcast?
That is the finest compliment I have ever been given, Thomas. Thank you so much for that. I think it is possible that we may have said all that needs to be said about this film. A final words and reviews. I bet I know what I'm going to hear from you guys, but wrap it up, Andy.
I wanted to like this film. I love the idea of what actually happened, of this true story of these Monuments Men. But as a film, it's a pass for me. It was lifeless, dull, and tonally all over the place. I would never want to watch it again.
Wow. Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
I loved it. No, I thought, as I said in the beginning, it was the reason I'm being so hard on the film is because of the pedigree. And by the pedigree, really, I mean like Grant Heslov and George Clooney. I'm glad that this story... No, I'm not, because this story deserves better. It's just this story deserves better. And I think it could have been done better. Having a movie destroying the idea of the Kelly's hero, the gang of misfits, all that stuff, and having it have the tone of the scenes between Matt Damon and Cate Blanchett is a movie that I would desperately like to see. And this just wasn't it.
Okay, well, at depth, I agree with both of you, except for the part about that this was not an enjoyable film. I did find myself enjoying the film after, the first act. I was absolutely able to kind of let myself go in it and enjoy it, in spite of the fact that it was tonally muted, and there were some things that, if you stop to overthink, you might find you'd be able to contest the film, and yet it represents something that is an important part of history, and it's a story that needs to be told and continue to be told. And there are other films about this time in our history, and my dad's favorite of them, and this is, I didn't really make the connection until I was telling him we were doing this film, is the John Frankenheimer film, The Train, 1964, with Burt Lancaster.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so this is, I sort of grew up, this is one of those films, where you grow up and in the background your dad is watching this film. And so I didn't really know what it was about, but
I've always heard The Train is good, but I've never had a chance to see it.
Yeah. So probably see that one if you have a choice, see that. Anyhow, let's rank it.
All right,
Tommy.
What a terrible time to take a sip of water. Oh, you mean flick chart? Flick chart, put on a seatbelt because it's flick chart. Yeah! All right, worth it. It gets better and better.
Every week. I should probably give some more definition to that. You should head over to flickchart.com / the next reel.
Flickchart. This is actually now, Pete. This is flickchart.com / TNR Film Board.
TNR Film Board. We have a whole new stack ranking for just the film board, and it's because we were trying to duck all those awkward moments when we asked Tom to rank whatever film we're talking about to Cloud Atlas. And which he refuses to see on principle alone.
Right. I don't know what any of those things are.
And so here we are, headed out there. You can follow that account if you just want to hang out with our current release films series.
Absolutely. Andy? And oddly enough, Cloud Atlas being a film board film, the first option is My Kiss Men or Cloud Atlas,
which Tom still hasn't seen. Dang it!
Abstain.
I have Cloud Atlas.
I would do Cloud Atlas as well. So there you go.
This is going to be sad.
And I do have Steve's rankings too. He emailed them to me, so I should check. He would pick. Let's see. Oh,
Monuments Men.
He hasn't seen Cloud Atlas. That's the one he hasn't seen. So it's you and me, baby. Cloud Atlas it is. Monuments Men or The Wolverine. I would do Wolverine over Monuments Men just to watch the bullet train.
Yep, Wolverine. I always forget about the bullet train. Wolverine.
What does Steve say?
He says Monuments Men.
I'm going to have to go the Wolverine.
All right.
Again, just in terms of what film I would put on, like right now.
Yeah, sure. Monuments Men or Oz the Great and Powerful?
Monuments Men. I dare you.
Oh, man.
I dare you.
Monuments Men.
I actually would do Monuments Men over Oz the Great and Powerful because that was wretched. So, all right. It's not at the bottom of our list.
Art and culture survives Oz the Great and Powerful.
That's right. The Monuments Men or Now You See Me?
The Monuments Men.
Monuments Men.
Yeah.
You guys are lucky we've done such terrible films.
That's right.
Are we? Because this is starting to sound like a lose-lose.
Yeah, that's right. All right, there we are. It's number 16 out of 19 on our flick chart. Only Now You See Me, Oz the Great and Powerful, and You're Next are below it.
Wow.
All right.
Wow. All right. Well, hey, this was a real treat, and yeah, I'm not sure that I mean those words, but thank you, Tommy, as always.
Thank you very much, everybody.
It's a treat to have you here. Andy, you too, man.
You bet, man. Always fun.
Always fun. No idea what we're doing next month, but you can bet, because Mike and Steve and Chad are not on the show, that me and Andy and Tom are going to pick it and force them to watch it. So thanks, everybody. Check us out at thenextreel.com. Follow us in iTunes, and we'll catch you next time on The Next Reel.